The next battleground was social media. What started as a local dispute transformed overnight into a viral sensation. Hashtag Rocky statue began trending with thousands of people sharing memes, support videos, and increasingly creative interpretations of Mark and Rocky's stand against HOA tyranny. Local news picked up the story, then regional news, that national outlets began calling. "We're more than just a statue," Mark told a CNN reporter, Rocky sitting proudly beside him. "We're a movement." Helena Rodriguez became an unexpected celebrity. Her studio was besieged by requests for interviews, with art magazines suddenly fascinated by the bronze monument to canine rebellion. She carefully documented every stage of the statue's creation, knowing they were crafting something far bigger than a simple sculpture. Margaret Whitmore's carefully constructed world began to crack. Neighborhood support, once unquestioningly hers, started to erode. Younger homeowners began challenging her long-standing rules. Old allies grew quiet, sensing a shift in the suburban power dynamics. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. Hushed conversations happened behind closed doors. Margaret's grip on power, once absolute, now felt tenuous. "This is about more than a dog," Margaret insisted to her remaining supporters. "This is about maintaining order, about protecting property values." But her arguments rang hollow. The statue represented something deeper, a pushback against mindless conformity, a celebration of joy and individuality. Social media exploded with support. Dog owners, HOA victims, artists, and freedom-loving citizens rallied behind Mark and Rocky. Crowdfunding pages appeared. T-shirts with Rocky's triumphant pose began selling online. The statue itself was a masterpiece. Elena had captured Rocky mid-leap, his expression a perfect blend of pure joy and defiance. 12 feet of bronze muscle and spirit, positioned to catch the morning sunlight perfectly at the entrance of Oak Ridge Estates. Mark's strategy was brilliant. He wasn't just fighting Margaret. He was exposing the absurdity of overly restrictive community rules. Each interview, each social media post chipped away at the facade of HOA authority. Rocky seemed to understand. He'd sit during interviews at Tilted looking like the most photogenic rebel in history. Photographers loved him. The public adored him. The lawsuit continued, but public opinion had already decided. Margaret's carefully constructed world of rules and regulations was crumbling. What had started as a personal dispute had become a national conversation about community, freedom, and the right to a little bit of joy. "They thought they could break my spirit," Mark would later say. "They had no idea we were just getting started." Rocky wagged his tail, a bronze version of himself soon to stand as a permanent monument to their victory. The suburban battlefield would never be the same again. The city permit office was Mark's first stop. He arrived early, a folder stuffed with meticulously prepared documents, Rocky's service dog certification prominently displayed at the top. It wasn't entirely true. Rocky wasn't a certified service dog, but Mark knew how to navigate bureaucratic waters. "I'm looking to commission a public art installation," Mark announced to the bewildered clerks, sliding a detailed rendering across the counter. The sketch depicted an enormous bronze statue of Rocky mid-leap with an expression of pure canine joy. 12 feet tall, positioned precisely at the entrance of Oak Ridge Estates. The clerk blinked. "This is quite a dog." Mark's smile was surgical. "Public art," he repeated, emphasizing each word. "Community enhancement project." Margaret Whitmore would never see this coming. The permit process was a labyrinth of bureaucratic red tape, but Mark was nothing if not persistent. He'd spent years crafting advertising campaigns that convinced people to buy things they didn't need. Securing a permit for a massive dog statue was child's play. Meanwhile, Rocky seemed to sense something was happening. He followed Mark around the house, watching intently as sketches were refined, measurements calculated, and local sculptors contacted. One artist, an eccentric woman named Helena Rodriguez, immediately understood the mission. "This isn't just a statue," Helena said during their first meeting, studying Mark's detailed plans. "This is a statement." Mark nodded. "Precisely." The real challenge would be placement. Oak Ridge Estates had strict guidelines about exterior modifications. Every inch of the community was regulated, from mailbox colors to lawn ornament dimensions. A 12-foot dog statue would be a nuclear auction in the world of suburban conformity. At the next HOA meeting, Margaret would be presenting her case against Rocky. Mark had obtained copies of the meeting agenda. Item number 7, disciplinary action regarding canine nuisance, Thompson residence. He couldn't wait. Rocky watched from the kitchen, a half-chewed tennis ball at his feet. To the casual observer, he looked like an ordinary dog. But there was something knowing in his eyes, a sense of impending triumph. Elena's workshop became a second home. Massive clay models took shape, capturing Rocky's essence, the playful tilt of his head, the perpetual readiness for adventure, the absolute joy of existence that Margaret and her rule-obsessed ilk seemed determined to crush. "We're making more than a statue," Mark told Rocky one evening, "We're making a declaration of freedom." Rocky's tail thumped against the floor, a rhythm of rebellion. The sculptural process was meticulous. Every muscle, every curve was carefully considered. This wasn't just about revenge. This was art. This was a statement about community, about joy, about the right to exist beyond suffocating regulations. Mark knew exactly what he was doing, and Margaret Whitmore was about to discover that some battles are better left unfought. The Oak Ridge Estates Community Center hummed with tension. Folding chairs squeaked under the weight of homeowners, each one eyeing Margaret Whitmore with a mixture of fear and reluctant respect. She stood at the podium, her navy blue blazer pressed within an inch of its life, reading glasses perched precisely halfway down her nose. "The matter of the Thompson canine is a serious community concern," Margaret began, her voice a razor-sharp instrument of bureaucratic precision. "Not only has this animal repeatedly violated our meticulously crafted community guidelines, but it represents a clear and present danger to the aesthetic and safety standards of Oak Ridge Estates." Scattered murmurs rippled through the room. Mark sat in the back, Rocky's service dog certification tucked into his jacket pocket, a secret weapon waiting to be deployed. Margaret clicked a remote, and a series of photographs appeared on the projector screen. Each image captured Rocky in what she clearly considered to be compromising positions: a tennis ball mid-flight near a carefully manicured flower bed, paw prints on the pristine walking path, a momentary pause near the community rose garden. "Exhibit A," she proclaimed, her finger jabbing at a particularly dramatic shot of Rocky mid-shake, water droplets flying in a perfect arc. Complete disregard for our landscaping standards. Mark couldn't help but smile. The photos were actually quite impressive. Rocky looked magnificent. The HOA meeting was a carefully choreographed dance of suburban power. Margaret had been president for 7 consecutive terms, her reign unchallenged, her word treated as gospel. Homeowners shifted uncomfortably, memories of past infractions and swift punishments etched into their collective consciousness. But Mark wasn't like the other residents. When the floor opened for discussion, he raised his hand. "I'd like to address the allegations," he said smoothly, walking to the podium with the confidence of a man who had a plan. Margaret's smile was razor-thin. "Mr. Thompson, I assume you're here to explain your dog's repeated violations." "Actually," Mark began, "I'm here to discuss a community enhancement project." A collective intake of breath swept through the room. Community enhancement was Margaret's sacred language. Her entire persona was built around the concept of improvement in regulation. He produced the detailed renderings of the Rocky statue. 12 feet of bronze magnificence, captured mid-leap, a symbol of joy and freedom that would stand at the entrance of Oak Ridge Estates. "I've secured all necessary permits," Mark continued, his voice calm and methodical. "A public art installation celebrating the spirit of our community. Specifically, the spirit of Rocky, a dog who embodies the freedom and joy we claim to value." Margaret's carefully applied makeup seemed to crack slightly. Her fingers gripped the podium's edge, knuckles turning white. Rocky, sitting beside Mark, tilted his head with what could only be described as a knowing smirk. The room held its breath. The first volley in the war between HOA Karen and the Thompson family had been launched, and neither side was backing down. The fallout from the HOA meeting was immediate and spectacular. Within hours, Margaret Whitmore had assembled an emergency committee, her fingers flying across her keyboard with the precision of a military strategist planning a counteroffensive. Mark's phone buzzed relentlessly. Neighborhood group chats lit up with speculation, screenshots, and increasingly wild theories about the proposed Rocky statue. Some neighbors were intrigued. Others were horrified. A few were secretly delighted by the potential chaos. Elena Rodriguez worked tirelessly in her studio, the massive bronze Rocky taking shape piece by piece. Each weld, each carefully sculpted muscle was a declaration of war against suburban conformity. The statue wasn't just art, it was a manifesto cast in metal. "They'll try to stop you," Elena warned Mark during one late-night sculpting session. Rocky lay nearby, chewing a bone and seemingly supervising the entire operation. Mark just smiled. "Let them try." The first official response came via certified mail. A thick envelope arrived bearing the Oak Ridge Estates HOA letterhead. A document so official it practically came with its own soundtrack of bureaucratic triumph. Margaret had found her loophole. "Notice of architectural review COMITE findings," a document proclaimed in bold, capitalized letters. The statue violated precisely 17 separate community guidelines. The height exceeded maximum allowable structure limitations. The proposed location interfered with sightlines. The artistic representation did not conform to the earth-tone minimalist aesthetic outlined in subsection 4.3 of the community bylaws. Most damning of all, a footnote suggesting that the statue's exuberant pose could be considered a visual disturbance that might negatively impact property values. Mark read the document twice, then burst out laughing. Rocky looked up, tail thumping against the hardwood floor. The neighborhood watched and waited. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some residents supported Mark, viewing the statue as a rebellion against HOA tyranny. Others sided with Margaret, whispering about maintaining community standards and property values. Social media became a battleground. Local news caught wind of the story. A local reporter contacted Mark, sensing the potential for a viral sensation. "It's about more than a statue," Mark told her, scratching Rocky behind the ears. "It's about the right to exist, to be joyful, to push back against ridiculous rules." Margaret was not idle. She compiled a dossier, a massive collection of documented infractions involving Rocky. Paw prints, occasional barking, the time he chased a squirrel near Mrs. Henderson's meticulously trimmed rose bushes. Each page was a weapon in her arsenal, each complaint a calculated move in her chess game of suburban control. But Mark had been preparing, and Rocky was ready for anything. The bronze statue continued to take shape, a monument to rebellion, to joy, to the spirit of a dog who refused to be contained by bureaucratic nonsense. The legal battle began on a Tuesday with a cease and desist letter that arrived like a thunderbolt of bureaucratic fury. Margaret Whitmore had enlisted the services of Peterson & Kleen, a law firm specializing in homeowners association disputes, the kind of lawyers who could find a violation in a breath of wind. Mark's attorney, Sarah Ramirez, was cut from a different cloth. A local lawyer with a reputation for taking on impossible cases, she saw Mark's statue as more than just a legal challenge. It was a statement. "They're going to throw everything that got at you," Sarah warned during their first strategy session. Rocky lay at her feet, occasionally nudging her hand for pets. HOA law is designed to suffocate individual expression. The first hearing was scheduled in the county courthouse, a brutalist concrete building that seemed to embody administrative oppression. Mark arrived with Elena's detailed architectural plans, Rocky's service dog certification, and a meticulously prepared portfolio documenting every step of the statue's creation. Margaret arrived with an entire briefcase of documentation. Her navy blue suit was pressed within an inch of its life, her glasses perched exactly halfway down her nose, the uniform of bureaucratic warfare. The judge, a seasoned woman named Elizabeth Harriman, listened with remarkable patience. She was known for her no-nonsense approach and deep skepticism of overly restrictive HOA regulations. "Ms. Whitmore," Judge Harriman interrupted midway through Margaret's exhaustive presentation, "could you explain precisely how a statue threatens the community's well-being?" Margaret faltered. Her carefully prepared speech momentarily derailed. "It sets a precedent," she stammered. "If we allow one oversized statue, we open the door to complete anarchy." Mark's attorney seized the moment. "Your Honor, my client has followed every single permit requirement. The statue is a form of public art, meticulously designed and approved by city planning." Rocky sat quietly beside Mark, a model of canine composure. To the casual observer, he looked like he understood exactly what was happening. The courtroom became a battlefield of suburban regulations versus individual creativity. Margaret's arguments grew increasingly desperate. She produced photographs of Rocky's alleged infractions, paw prints, a momentary pause near a flower bed, the time he allegedly scared Mrs. Henderson's cat. Each piece of evidence seemed more ridiculous than the last. Sarah Ramirez dismantled Margaret's case with surgical precision: service dog certification, proper permits, artistic merit, community enhancement. Each argument was a precisely placed blow against the HOA's rigid control. Rocky's bronze statue loomed in everyone's imagination, 12 feet of pure, unbridled joy captured in metal. A monument to pushing back against petty tyranny. The hearing adjourned with no immediate resolution. But something had shifted. The balance of power was no longer as clear-cut as Margaret had believed. Outside the courthouse, neighbors had begun to gather. Some held signs supporting Mark. Others whispered about the statue that might change everything. Rocky wagged his tail, sensing a victory on the horizon. The next battleground was social media. What started as a local dispute transformed overnight into a viral sensation. #Rocky statue began trending, with thousands of people sharing memes, support videos, and increasingly creative interpretations of Mark and Rocky's stand against HOA tyranny. Local news picked up the story, then regional news. That national outlets began calling. "We're more than just a statue," Mark told a CNN reporter, Rocky sitting proudly beside him. "We're a movement." Helena Rodriguez became an unexpected celebrity. Her studio was besieged by requests for interviews, with art magazines suddenly fascinated by the bronze monument to canine rebellion. She carefully documented every stage of the statue's creation, knowing they were crafting something far bigger than a simple sculpture. Margaret Whitmore's carefully constructed world began to crack. Neighborhood support, once unquestioningly hers, started to erode. Younger homeowners began challenging her long-standing rules. Old allies grew quiet, sensing a shift in the suburban power dynamics. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. Hushed conversations happened behind closed doors. Margaret's grip on power, once absolute, now felt tenuous. "This is about more than a dog," Margaret insisted to her remaining supporters. "This is about maintaining order, about protecting property values." But her arguments rang hollow. The statue represented something deeper, a pushback against mindless conformity, a celebration of joy and individuality. Social media exploded with support. Dog owners, HOA victims, artists, and freedom-loving citizens rallied behind Mark and Rocky. Crowdfunding pages appeared. T-shirts with Rocky's triumphant pose began selling online. The statue itself was a masterpiece. Elena had captured Rocky mid-leap, his expression a perfect blend of pure joy and defiance. 12 feet of bronze muscle and spirit, positioned to catch the morning sunlight perfectly at the entrance of Oak Ridge Estates. Mark's strategy was brilliant. He wasn't just fighting Margaret, he was exposing the absurdity of overly restrictive community rules. Each interview, each social media post chipped away at the facade of HOA authority. Rocky seemed to understand. He'd sit during interviews at Tilted looking like the most photogenic rebel in history. Photographers loved him. The public adored him. The lawsuit continued, but public opinion had already decided. Margaret's carefully constructed world of rules and regulations was crumbling. What had started as a personal dispute had become a national conversation about community, freedom, and the right to a little bit of joy. "They thought they could break my spirit," Mark would later say. "They had no idea we were just getting started." Rocky wagged his tail, a bronze version of himself soon to stand as a permanent monument to their victory. The suburban battlefield would never be the same again. The final hearing arrived like a thunderclap. Oak Ridge Estates Community Center had been transformed, no longer the sterile meeting room of past HOA gatherings, but a packed auditorium of expectant spectators. News cameras lined the back wall. Social media live streams captured every moment. Margaret Whitmore looked smaller somehow. Her navy blazer, once a symbol of unassailable authority, now seemed to hang loosely on her shoulders. Years of unchallenged power had not prepared her for this moment of public reckoning. Mark sat calm and collected, Rocky beside him. The dog wore a custom-made bounty, a touch of whimsy that made the internet absolutely lose its mind. Judge Elizabeth Harriman entered, her reputation for no-nonsense rulings preceding her. The room fell silent. This court has carefully considered the matter of the Thompson residence statue and the complaints filed by the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. She began, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. Margaret's legal team had thrown everything into their final argument: binders of regulations, meticulously documented infractions, expert testimonies about community standards and property values. Mark's defense was simpler: art, expression, the spirit of joy that a community should celebrate, not suppress. Alina Rodriguez took the stand, explaining the artistic merit of the statue. Her testimony was a masterclass, part art history, part passionate defense of creative expression. She spoke about Rocky not just as a subject, but as a symbol of unbridled happiness. "This statue," Alina said, her voice steady, "represents more than one dog. It represents the human and canine spirit of freedom." Social media exploded with every word. The turning point came unexpectedly. An elderly resident, Arthur Henderson, husband of the same Mrs. Henderson who had complained about Rocky chasing her cat, stood up during the public comment period. "In 40 years of living in this community," he said, his voice crackling with emotion, "I've never seen something that made me smile more than this statue. My wife might disagree about the cat, but I say let the dog stand." Laughter rippled through the room. The tension broke. Judge Harriman's ruling was swift and decisive. A statue would remain. The HOA's complaint was dismissed. Margaret's carefully constructed world of petty regulations crumbled in a matter of moments. Rocky wagged his tail, seemingly aware of the victory. Outside, the bronze statue gleamed in the sunlight, 12 feet of pure, unbridled joy. A monument to pushing back against suburban conformity, a celebration of individual spirit. Margaret Whitmore gathered her things in silence. Her reign was over. The suburban kingdom she had ruled with an iron fist had finally rejected her. Mark knelt down and scratched Rocky behind the ears. "We did it, buddy," he whispered. The dog's tail thumped against the floor, a victorious rhythm of rebellion.